Hello, and welcome to the Motherhood Village podcast. I'm on with a very special guest. I have Dr. Sheryl Ziegler, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and a play therapist in private practice. She is the author of Mommy Burnout: How to Reclaim Your Life and Raise Healthier Children in the Process. She's a regular national local news contributor on topics related to parenting and mental health, and did a TEDx talk on why moms are miserable, which is all about the power of connection. She is the host of Dr. Sheryl's Pod Couch, love that, and the founder of the Parent Child Puberty course, Start with the Talk. She's a frequent speaker on chronic stress, parenting, and burnout, both in the workplace and at home. And Dr. Ziegler is Colorado's NBC affiliate parenting expert for the franchise series Mental Health and Me. I love that. Welcome, Dr. Ziegler. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing so well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on. So we met at an event, I think 2 years ago, and I was supposed to reach out, and then life got the better of me. And then we followed and connected on LinkedIn. And every time I see your posts, I'm like, oh, I just need to we need to do this. So I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because I just think you bring a wealth of knowledge. And I'm sure I can talk to you about 100 million things and get deep, but we'll stick to a few major topics here, maybe have you back. But I always ask my guests to start with your favorite book or one that has made a great impact for you.
Oh, good question. My favorite book. I have different categories. I will say the book that changed my life the most. Well, honestly, you're stumping me because I'm an avid reader. There is a book by Kat James, and it was called like the beauty inside. Now, see, now I'm forgetting exactly. It was like it seemed like it was going to be this beauty book, but actually, what it was is like was this was 20 years ago. It was a book about eating organic and processed foods and all of these health things. So that was a very influential book for me because it had to do with health. I would say, a pretty like a pretty big book that changed a lot of things in terms of looking at traumas. The Body Keeps the Score. That's a big one. And then I'll do another category. I'd say in terms of parenting, I'm literally looking at my bookshelf because I read so much. But there's so many books I like. Oh, let me just say Kat James's book is The Truth About Beauty. But I would say today, because it really can change a lot. Well, I'll just do a more recent one, I guess, for parenting. Good Inside by Becky Kennedy is a
It's
really
a good
good
one.
book. It's about sort of attachment-based parenting, and I thought it was really good. But I'd have to give you like a top 10 list because that's how much I love books.
Maybe we'll give that
That's
because I
probably
do. Eventually, I want to create like I've asked all my guests this, that I've had 190 something conversations. So I'd love to have, and some of them overlap. So yeah, if you want to send me that and say, listen, this is a parenting podcast, right? So most of the people listening are parents or soon to be parents. Doesn't necessarily have to be a parenting book, anything that has made an impact. But yeah, if you have a list, then we'll rock and roll afterwards and put it on the notes part. Okay. I want to get into the aspect. Like I said, I think I could have handled this so many different ways, but I think this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I believe this episode still drops, or if not even early June. But either way, I think mental health is something that we're talking about frequently. And the episode that dropped this week was actually with a pediatrician, and she was sharing that she wishes schools did more to talk about mental health in really small kids, because it's like we started top down, or we're like, oh, adults in this mental health crisis, and then, oh, teens, tweens. And it's like, well, what about the littles that can now grow into maybe healthier adults with their emotions? So I want to kind of stay there, but also with the mommy stuff. But I want to talk about, since you did write the book and you have the TEDx talk on that, what are some common signs of mommy burnout, and maybe even some misconceptions that some moms might think or not even realize is it's burnout, that parents can overlook? And how can they differentiate between the normal and maybe something more serious? And then how does that affect the parent-child connection? It's almost like an A-B.
okay. So first I want to give some context about mommy burnout. Mommy burnout was a phenomenon that I observed in about the year 2010. It was something that I started writing about in 2015 to 2016. I didn't call it mommy burnout at the time. I didn't understand what was happening. I just saw what was happening. And so when I wrote that book and got an agent, she essentially said, we need to name this. This is a condition. This appears to be a condition, seek to name it. And so when I was figuring out, because I was calling it modern day motherhood, it was just, right? It's like even that title, that working title is very observational. Like, hey, here's what's going on in modern day in moms. But a lot of really cool things have happened. I mean, I discovered really that I thought that the overlap between the burnout research and chronic stress that we were studying in doctors and nurses could so easily, naturally be applied to moms. And so that's where mommy burnout came from was, wow, the vocation, instead of the vocation being a nurse, the vocation is a mother. And then here are the symptoms, which I will get into. But one of the very cool things that happened between 2018 to 2020 was in 2018, a few months after it had published, the World Health Organization came out with burnout syndrome. And then they started talking about burnout a lot more. And so that was the first step in sort of validation, because it's not like I'm running a lab. I'm a clinician. I'm treating patients. I'm not running a lab. So it was very validating. And then what happened in 2020 was the American Psychological Association came out with parenting burnout. So, and I think that's to be, of course, inclusive of dads. I saw a very specific phenomenon. I still see it within moms. And so sometimes I feel like in the beginning, maybe I felt a little like apologetic, like, well, this is just what I'm seeing. And it's the moms that are mostly coming in. But even now, as I look, I do think, of course, I acknowledge dads are involved in very different ways than a generation before us. I think that dads can experience burnout. I still think, though, this is a phenomenon that's really specific to women, the way that women identify with motherhood, the way that women take on the feelings and the stressors of their kids. It is still gendered in that way, and it is still different. So I guess that's something I just want to say. And then, what the definition of burnout is the chronic physical and emotional exhaustion that results from a woman. Again, this is the mommy burnout, but
Sure.
the results from any person feeling like they are no longer good at their job, which results in cynicism and resentfulness. So what is interesting about that is in our country, in the United States, we don't have a diagnosis for burnout. So basically, most of those people will get diagnosed with depression. And in the book, I have a section that says, are you stressed or are you depressed? And for me, there's a really obvious difference. Obviously, in the ICD-11, which is how people are diagnosed in medical ways, they also see a difference. We're just not there yet with the DSM-5, which is how psychologists diagnose people. So, but to me, there really is a difference. And so, that was kind of like your question. You were sort of saying like regular burnout, because we use that term a lot, right? I'm really
Yes.
stressed out. I'm burned out. And
Yeah.
so the difference is when you are stressed out, burned out, or you say that, usually a break will get you feeling a little bit more revived. Maybe not to 100%, but you do, or you're like, I needed that. Oh man, that vacation was awesome. You might even be like, I need a second week on that vacation, but I do feel a positive effect of the first one. But when you are burned out, just simply doing that isn't going to make that kind of difference. So, yes, some people quit their jobs, but in terms of the vocation of parenting, you don't get to quit, right? There is no such thing as like, well, I'll just quit. That job sucks. That
Yeah.
boss sucks. So just quit. So when you don't get to do that, this is why stress, which we all feel as a parent, chronic stress, which we really want to manage because it has very significant impact on our mental and physical health. And then burnout is something that has to be, first of all, seen and appropriately diagnosed or at least acknowledged as such so that it can be addressed. Because otherwise, the part B is how does it impact your kids? I mean, it probably impacts kids pretty similarly to how maternal depression impacts kids. When you are stressed, depressed, or chronically stressed, you are not as attuned. You don't notice the cues as much. You may
Yes.
not be as present physically or mentally. You may sort of have a really negative outlook on the world. And so the things that your kids need from you, like the spin about why it's gonna be okay, or why you might notice when your kid walks in that they had a tough day, or they're really down, or their grades are going down, all those little signs that something might be going on, you are more likely to miss if you are in a state of depression or chronic stress.
Oh my God, yes. And there's so much to unpack there. I was doing a presentation for a local PTA, kind of showing like what I have because I help with mommy burnout. I'm obviously not a psychologist, but I do it in the form of community connection. We get outside, I bring experts in. That's kind of my deal. So I was talking to this PTA and I had done some research and they were saying children that grow up in a household that has depression and anxiety, I mean, we hear it, but I'll say it, will more likely end up with depression and anxiety, right? And it makes sense. And to your point, though, I think the most simplest fact is number one, you could be missing cues of if you're so focused here, you're not understanding what could be going on with your child, especially if it's developmental or if they're in school age, if they're school age kids. I mean, I have a kindergartner and I was telling a friend of mine with older kids, I'm like, why didn't you tell me like how hard this is of navigating even the school life, right? Like the whole aspect of now your child's this, the transition into that, and how I need to be even more present because now we're dealing with kids that come from really different households and kids that have cell phones that now my son is exposed to, like all these things that I did not think I was going to have to deal with at 6 years old. So there's so much to unpack there, but I love how it's so simple in the sense of like it's this, and burnout sounds like, yeah, you had a rough day and you're like, I need XYZ. But when it comes to parenting, we can't really take a break. If anything, it's almost like we almost got to be on it because like you said, raising kids, things change, maybe an issue with a friend, and making sure you're on. So I'll add an addition to that. What do you recommend from your point of view? And obviously I know you have the book, and I will put the book in the show notes and would love to kind of even showcase the book to my moms. But what are some things then do you suggest to kind of overcome that burnout? What if a mom is listening to this and is like, yeah, that sounds great, but no, I can't afford to go on a vacation. But I think it's also more than just, oh, I'll take a bubble bath and have a facial. Maybe talk about some things that moms can do if they're starting to feel this burnout come on that we know is basically inevitable because we're going, we have jobs, we have companies, all of that. I know
Yeah.
that's a mouthful, but yeah.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting is the number one thing. So a lot of times I get asked if you could just make one recommendation for a
Yes.
mom who is in the state of, stress, overwhelm, burnout. The number one thing we know by research is social connection. There is nothing more powerful than being connected with other human beings. And sometimes when I say that, somebody will say, what if you don't have it? I don't have
Yes.
a friend I can go to. I don't have a best friend. I don't have my village. We move. I mean, with the stats on how much we move around, there's a lot of reasons why we're in this place. And that's part of my talk of why moms are miserable. That
Yes.
TEDx talk was because we aren't connected to each other. And in the talk, I share a moment in my life where I realized, like, whoa, I need to make some changes. So, yes, I've experienced burnout myself. That was for me at the birth of my second child. And I also have experienced thinking that I was socially connected,
Okay.
but not actually being socially connected in the way that I needed because I had young kids and I'm from New York. And I was thinking, well, those are my best friends, right? So I talk to them on the phone, I'll tell them what's going on. That's all good. So I was thinking I was doing well
Yeah.
with my friendships because my friendships were very, very old childhood friends. And then I had a situation, I wind up in a hospital and I'm laying there. My husband's not with me because he's home because we have three little kids at home. And I really had the moment where I was sitting there thinking to myself, who actually cares that I'm here right now? Right? Like my friends who I thought of were, between a time difference, it's like 9 o'clock on a Sunday night in New
Yeah.
York, like, and they're in New York and I'm in Colorado. And, I know they cared, but I was thinking like, and then it made me realize like, who here cares? Right. And
Yes.
we had as full of a social calendar as you can imagine, always like tons of quote friends and
Yes.
lots of things to do. Lots of couples we went out to dinner with, and all this like overly full schedule, actually. But at the end of the day, I realized I was not taking those relationships and really making them personal,
Mm,
really opening up, really like, yes, I was spending time and I'm sure we were having a good time, but it was like when you're sitting in a hospital and realizing like I felt very alone in that moment,
yeah.
I was like, wow, I have people who I know I can call absolutely and say, can you take my kids to school tomorrow? Can you pick up so and so from, daycare? Can you bring a meal over?
Yes.
Yes, I had that. Definitely had that. But in terms of like, hey, Nicole, I know this is so crazy. It's Sunday night and like you're probably watching Sunday Night Football because so was I, but I'm having a massive kidney stone
Yeah.
attack. I'm in tons of pain and I just knew you'd want to know. I didn't
Yes.
feel like I had that. And it was like a huge turning point for me to really start diving into that part, especially because some people just say, I don't have friends. If you look at the comments on YouTube where my TEDx talk lives, there are like
Yes. I
thousands
saw.
of comments. Yeah. And,
Yes.
and they're
Yes.
sad. And some of them are
Yes.
sad, right? Besides a couple of,
Yes.
rude ones or people being like, oh, stop being miserable and don't have kids, right? Like that's
Yeah.
so
No.
short sighted. I
Yes.
think there's just a lot of people that are like, I've moved around so much, or I've never had
Yes.
a best friend. And you see this friendship piece. And so when that aligned in terms of the research about what we could do, not just about the loneliness epidemic, but also just about moms and that maternal stress, it is number one. And I always say to people, you're not too busy to go out Thursday night. You are not too busy to take a Saturday morning walk. I know you feel you are. You really
Yes.
believe it. Like I've been there too, right? I just can't. And I talk about banning busy, ban busy. Stop walking around the world and talking about how busy you are because busy builds walls. It builds these
Mm,
barriers, right? If you met me, let's say at car line with your kindergartner, right? You're a kindergarten parent. You're probably like, you want to know everything. You want to be connected. Doesn't
yes.
mean it's going to happen, but probably deep down you would love to be. But if you met me and like the first couple minutes, you were like, I like her. I think I want to get to know her better. Maybe I could ask her for
Yes.
coffee or something. And then I say to you, oh my God, Nicole, it was so nice to meet you. I am so crazy busy. I got to run and like, whatever. My nanny will pick up my kid or whatever. You are going to walk away going, I met this woman today. I really liked her, but I
So
can't ask
busy.
her to do anything.
Yeah.
She's so busy.
Yeah.
Right. And hence starts the isolation of a kindergarten mom. And this starts with babies. If you read those comments, most women say, I've never been so lonely as I was when I had babies.
Well, yeah, and to your point, when I saw that, it resonated with me because I remember looking back, I was building the motherhood village as my son was in preschool, and I never once asked those moms to connect. Like I was so focused, pick him up, gotta leave, and I was like, how many moms are here? I never stopped to ask them, hey, let's meet for a coffee. Like, because it was like, oh, wait, I'm doing this. When I had like a slew of moms, that could have been my starting point. So it resonated with me, and it is very powerful. The group we have that we meet in person with the support groups, and there's something very, very special about the peer-to-peer aspect of it. We don't really give advice. It's just like, listen, I give every woman come and vomit at the mouth, for lack of a better word, like just let it out. And one mom came last night for the first time and she's like, I don't usually do this, but I just need to vent. And she just went out. And at the end, she was like, thank you. She's like, I did not realize how much I just needed to like say that to someone with eyes on me, like, yeah, you know what? We've been there. And she kept apologizing. She's like, I'm taking up time. I'm like, no, this is a space. So to your point, the social connection I know is key, but I also want you to go back because I think it was so poignant with the TEDx talk, like why moms are miserable. Talk to my listeners then. How do we get rid of the miserableness? I know it's the social connection we can start building and let go of the busyness and attempt to say, listen, I'm going to go for a walk and attempt to really focus more inward, right? And making more connections. But is there also a way of eliminating the isolation by maybe coming to terms, asking for help, like also talk in terms of that for someone listening to this of like, what are some other things that are leading to moms really being miserable? Are they trying to take on too much? Are they trying to be the martyrs, which we know they are, but talk about that level too.
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. The first one about asking for help. It's really hard for women to ask for help. And then when we actually do it, then it's really hard to receive it. So like that mom last night, right? She could be the one. Basically, that's the version of that. Like she shows up at this thing and then she takes her, she takes some air up in the room and she vents like clearly she needed to. And then it's like something happens and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I talk so much. Oh my God, I know other people. And
Yes.
that's what we do. And it's the same thing. I could be like, oh, hey, Nicole, you know what? I have this meeting next week. Do you think Wednesday morning you could bring my kid home for, can you just drop him off home? And that's all I need you to do, whatever. And then you go, yeah, yeah, you no problem. And then what am I going to do for the next week? I'm going to ruminate that, well, Nicole's busy too. Why do
Yes.
I think I have the right to ask her when she's busy? She's got her own kids, she's got her own life, she's got her own job. And then I'm very likely to actually cancel on that. I'm very likely to be like, oh, no, no, you know what? I figured it out.
Yes.
And, or if I do accept the help, I'm very likely to thank you too much. Right. And also feel like now I'm indebted to you. I owe you
Yes.
something. Right.
Yes.
We cannot just for some reason just be like, hey, you think you could do this for me? You say yes. I say, great, thanks. And yes, I'm going to say thank you again when I see you. And then I'm going to tell you I owe you. Let me know
It's,
when
I was
I
gonna
can help
say,
you.
like, oh, yeah, I owe you one. I know.
That's it. Right. If we could have that mentality, because there is such a thing, there's so interesting. The other day I was doing this talk, and I always have in the talk, if it's about mental health, I have this definition of mental health. And the definition is by the American Psychological Association. And it is the longest, most cumbersome, with like too many points in it. It's like the most run on definition. And then I looked up, I was like, every time I give this talk, I say, oh my gosh, is that a mouthful? And I do my whole thing. So I was like, let me find a different definition. And then I found the World Health Organization definition, total game changer. In the APA definition, it's about me, and more me. Mental health is the ability to handle and cope with stress, form healthy relationships, come up with good coping mechanisms, like all this very egocentric stuff. What can I do? The World Health Organization definition says, yes, you have the mental health means you have the ability to cope with anxiety so that you can give to your community, that you can be in relationship with others. It's very outward. It literally is like
Yes.
you are mentally healthy when you can pour into yourself so that you can pour out to the world. And I was like, yes. And we
Yes.
just don't have that mentality here. The other thing that I think is a big tip that I read a whole chapter on are really like mothers and mother-in-laws, or, just your elder, whoever that might be in your life. But for the sake of this, I'll just say mothers and mother-in-laws. We have this idea that whatever they did in the past is outdated. And they don't really know the world and they
Yeah.
don't understand screens. They don't understand social media or how much I work, right? You might feel judged, which you might be
Yes.
judged. I don't know. Like maybe your mother-in-law, whoever, maybe they didn't work. And so you're like, I'm not going to ask them because they're probably going to, give me a little jab about, well, maybe if you didn't work so much, right? Maybe if you're
Yes.
home more. But the reality is that I think we have to start taking in information through diverse lenses. Like this is the
Mhm.
way we got to 2024. We did have villages. We did look to our elders,
Yes.
right? And we don't do that anymore, whether it's because physically we're not around them and or just we have this message. I mean, even these parenting perspectives and a lot of this stuff, like this is just sort of made up. Like these aren't real research-based things. Nothing has changed in terms of attachment, how a baby attaches to a mother. That hasn't changed. Our parenting paradigm might change, right? In the 1950s, 60s, 70s,
Sure.
it's like 2-year-olds would play outside by themselves. Again, by the time I was 7, I was coming home to an empty house. We were the latchkey kids, right?
Yeah.
And now that would be like child abuse.
Yes.
But back then it was like, yeah, kid, here's a key, open the door, turn around, lock it, get yourself a snack and watch cartoons. Today, if you said, yeah, that's what I do, you would be
Yes.
bashed and you would be judged and you literally might be called an abuser. And
For
so
sure.
I want people to know those are just trends. Tiger moms, helicopter
Yes.
moms, all those are just trends, literally. But the core of how do you love a child? How do you connect? How do you attach? How do you even feed? All those things that are like really big debates, that hasn't changed. That has not changed. Yes, modern world gives us new paradigms, sometimes new tools, sometimes more complications. More
Yes.
choices does not mean better. It just means more stress, right? So I think one of the things that we can do is like, don't be afraid to ask people questions, ask
Yeah.
much older people questions, and you take from it what works for you. If you get vulnerable enough to ask your mother-in-law, if you say, "Oh, I remember you telling me that, that your baby was colic when you were little." Yeah, she might be like, literally, we rubbed, right? What's the alcohol? They used to rub alcohol in the gums and
Uh,
stuff.
was it Bacardi? No. My Ray and nephew, my husband's part Jamaican, so she was like, "Oh, put the Ray and nephew." I'm like, "What?" Yes, that's like a
Totally.
100 proof.
Totally. But like what
Yeah,
I'm saying is you can still learn something from that, right?
yes,
You can still go, even if you go, okay, like I'm not going to rub alcohol in my kids' gums, right? Although I think an
but
entire generation was okay, but like, okay, I'm not going to do that. But there's something in her story that I know I can gain. I know I can learn from. Maybe it's even just the reassurance. Oh, honey, let me tell you, it lasted for me for 11 weeks. 11 weeks, this kid cried every night. I was
yeah.
totally sleep deprived, blah, blah, blah. Even if just what you get from it is like, and she survived. I'll survive.
Yes, it's so funny not to cut you off. I say that often. I say I do it with the perspective of if they survived with much little, we can survive as well. So for
Yeah.
me, I always use it as because my mom from the Bronx lived away from her parents, so she didn't have it, didn't have much. And she was like, "You were on my hip, and I was backing me. Like we didn't have no one to call. Like you were just there. I had to figure it out." So hearing that always stayed with me. So anytime I'd be overwhelmed, I'm like, all right, my mom like did this with much, much little than we had in the sense of, to your point, it's so overwhelming. Baby warmers and all these like things. And for me, I took it in that way. I'm like, wait, if they survived and I survived without like bottle warmers and wipe warmers and all these things, like I think we'll be okay. So that's so valid. And I love the diverse thought. I think there's so much, I think, social media that does good and well, but the unfortunate part is that because there's so many people giving these advice and then your algorithm, you hear it all the time because now the algorithm is going to show it. So now you can have someone maybe who is an expert, but then you have someone who's not, and you're hearing all of these things, but then you're it's not diversified. You're not, you're not listening to other things to say, well, that could be good, but I also need to hear this because our children are so well rounded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just something that's missing in terms of honoring the mothering experience, whatever that might be. I used to have the same thing. Like I told my daughter this the other day, she's 16 now, but when she wasn't sleeping well, when she was an infant, I was so like, I mean, a combination of scared and in shock that I would walk around in public places and I would stare at couples that had like toddlers. And I'd be like, I just want to go up to them and ask them, like, when did your baby stop crying in the middle of the night and start sleeping? Because I'm so sleep deprived, right? And I never did it, but it's all I kept thinking in my head was like, but they seem okay and their kid is 2 and blah, blah, blah. And she was like laughing. She's like, you had that thought? I'm like, yeah, I just was like, when is this gonna end? Like it just, but I think, these are things that we are not reaching out. We're not,
Yeah.
we think, don't think that people have to raise their kids like you. You could talk to people who you think raising their kids really differently. There's still something you can get.
Yes.
Sometimes I even think like littlest things, like some families we know and we spend a lot of time with, they curse around their kids really freely, blah, blah, blah. They have whatever on the TV. And sometimes I have, because I didn't do that. I still don't do that.
Yeah.
I just don't curse around my kids. And we're not like super open in that way. But sometimes when we're with them, of course, my kids are older now, they'll look at me and smile and they'll laugh or whatever. And I'll just think, you know what, though? Like, that's my kid's best friend. And that's my best friend, too. Like, everybody's going to be okay. Everybody's
Yes.
going to be okay because they're
Yes.
loved. And maybe the cursing to them is just like another form of passion. Like I've had kids say in sessions before, like, but my mom says the F word. And then she's like, yeah, I can say it, but I'm allowed to say it. And blah, 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 whatever they
Yeah.
say. And I just think like, it takes some experience, of course, because now my kids are older. But
Sure.
one of those things is just knowing like there, besides literally keeping, abuse and neglect,
Of
and
course.
that's an obvious, but like these other things, just A, realize they're trends, B, realize there's a lot of solutions to the problems, a lot of ways to
Yeah.
get to what plus what equals 10,
Yes.
right? There's a lot of ways to do things, and feel free to ask or observe how other people do things, even if you're not going to do it that way, even if you're not going to, you will learn something. The other thing I'll say is, yeah, when we ask for help, learn how to receive the help. And then, if you don't have your village, and I'm sure you experience this a lot in your work, you can build it. I promise they will come. The statistics on the level of loneliness in our country, the
Yes.
statistics on even only 1 in 4 women feels that they have a best friend and somebody who actually understands them, that they would confide in. 1 in 4. That means 3 in 4 women, 75% of the room you're in, or the auditorium you're in, or the coffee shop you're in, feel the same way you do. And you
Yeah.
you can build it. And when I say that, it means literally send a group text out and
Yes.
say, I did it. I just moved to a neighborhood. Now I'm connecting like crazy, right? But like I moved in here and I just said, I didn't know my neighbors well, but I had their numbers. So I put a group chat out and I said, it was like total last minute. Tomorrow at 5 o'clock. I only even had 1 hour actually. So I knew I was gonna be dressed up because I was going to a dinner. So I said, tomorrow from 5 to 6:30, my house, simple apps, and like BYOB. Like
Mm.
just come over, just so
Yeah.
we can get to know each other. And it was awesome. And in an hour and a half, we got a lot accomplished. And then when we saw each other, oh, you want to do this? You want to do this together? Want to play
Yes.
tennis? Want to take a walk? It didn't take very much. And so I just want to say that too. This doesn't take anything fancy. You don't have to have it at
Yeah.
your house. You can just meet out at a park. You can, if you've got really little
Yes.
kids, oh, moms love to do that stuff. Hey,
Yes.
11 a.m. before nap times, who wants to meet in the park? Throw it out there and just show up. At least one other person will show up.
I love that. Yeah, we did. I think we're missing that in the neighborhood. I grew up in a neighborhood when I was younger. We would have block parties all the time. Like we all knew the neighbors. We were running around. I think the kids, my parents would be partying. I mean, great partying fun. I'd be out running around to like 8. I was like 10, 9, like running around, but we all knew where we were. We'd check in with each other. And when we moved to our home, I told my husband, I was like, I need to know all the neighbors. Like maybe we're not going to do the block parties. And we do when it's 4th of July, like we come out and we come. I was like, but we need something. Like I cannot have our son. Like this is how I was raised. And to your point, we're missing that. Yes, we know a little bit more. We do have to be careful our neighbors. And it's so sad that it's unfortunate, that we do hear more of these like nefarious stories. So we're scared. But there is something beautiful about having that. So to your point, your village could be your neighbors that you're like, listen, if anything, even if it's I'm going on vacation, anything to know that like you're building that community. I want to talk about what's next for you, and I know it's gonna tie into your play therapy. You have your mother-daughter puberty course. Talk to me about what's next for you and what you're currently working on and why you're so passionate about this next step of where you're going and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about it. So for people who don't know my work, I do run a private practice in Denver and I have for almost 20 years. And that's a group practice. I've got interns. We got a lot going on there. And what has evolved from that are a couple of things. Like 10 years ago, I started this mother-daughter puberty class. And it was like, it's so great. I always tell people too, when you're starting off in your career or you have some cool idea, it really is like Nike says, like, just do it. Do not overthink it. Do not overthink whatever the idea. You want to write a book, write it, just write it. You want to
Yes.
do whatever, just do it. Because I didn't think too much about it. I had a friend who came back. She had been in San Francisco and she said, I was like, oh, she came back after 6 months. We had a little dinner and I was like, oh, what were some of the cool things that you did when you were there? And she said, one of the coolest things I did is I went to this class and this nurse gave this talk and it was about puberty and her daughter's name was Parker. I took Parker and her Parker was in 4th grade. And I was like, wait, what? And I am a child psychologist. And I said, you took Parker? I feel like that's so young. And she was like, no, it was awesome. I was like, that's cool. And then she was talking more and more. And as she was talking, I was thinking, these are mini talks that I have with the kids that I work with in my practice.
Yes.
Because, right, a lot of girls will be like, I have a question for you, but I don't want you to tell my mom. And then they might say, like, I kind of feel like I need a bra. How can I get that? Or
Yeah.
how do I know when my period's going to start? They were just like we'd have little conversations. So I heard my friend Kim talk and I was like, I'm going to just make a class. Like, again, I didn't overthink it. I made my own curriculum. I made it social, emotional, and physical.
Love it.
And I've been doing it ever since. It's like one of my favorite. It's the sweetest thing. And yes, it is for pretty much 4th and 5th graders. Sometimes there's 3rd and sometimes there's 6th, but pretty
Mm.
much the sweet spot is 4th and 5th. So
Interesting.
So I do that, right? And then the pandemic, that's always in person. The pandemic happened and I was like, we can't
Yes.
not have this class. So I made it an online class, something I didn't even know anything about, but people were available. So I was like, hey, how should we do this? It was kind of crazy. It felt like it was literally, I think it was May of 2020. And I filmed an all day, this class, and everybody was in masks except for me, which felt like crazy. Like, what am
Mhm.
I doing? But I really wanted to make this class.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then I knew I wanted to write a second book. And in 2020, of course, like in 2019, what I wanted to write a book about it was kind of like a working title of Mad World. I just felt like the world was going mad and anxiety and collective trauma. So, can you imagine the year before a global pandemic? I was like, there's this collective trauma in the air. I don't know. There's something I'm feeling like it just was striking. So, but there didn't seem to be so much of an interest for that. So then the pandemic started, and then the world really, was up on its side. And then I was, meeting and talking with people, and they were saying, what do you want to write about? And I'm like, we have this teen mental health crisis and I want to do something about it. And initially I thought, okay, so I'll write a book about teen mental health. And then what happened was every time, and I have the draft still, every time I wrote some sort of draft of like a chapter summary or something, every single time I thought, it's too late. It's too late though. Why would I give an advice? Why would I give a mom who has a 15-year-old this advice? Not like it's too late, like it's never going to happen,
Yes.
but we could be doing stuff a couple years earlier that would probably prevent this from happening. And so that is where I'm at. I'm writing a book. I'm so close to it being done. It's being published by HarperCollins, who is also my first publisher, but with
I
a
love it.
different editor. And it's called The Crucial Years. It's like the essential guide to kids ages 6 to 12. And it's
Wow. So men
everything
and girls and boys, girls
girls
and
and
boys.
boys. So
Love it.
yes, my girl talk, everybody's always like, when are you doing the boy version? And the coolest thing is it started off with a focus on earlier puberty and mental health. And that
Mm.
was the premise of the book, where I'm going to focus on kids ages 6 to 12. I'm going to sort of reveal how kids are going through earlier puberty in this overlap. Like
Yes.
we think of it as a teenage issue. Puberty is no, not a teenage issue, right?
Yeah.
It's happening really young. So average age 9 for girls. And so what happened is this has become what I'm jokingly, but not jokingly, calling a mega book. Like the essential guide is actually legit. Like, who am I to say I'm writing the essential guide? It's going to be a very thick book, because it's like once I opened up to seeing all of the areas that are plaguing our teenagers, I was like, I am going to write the road map to getting to teens, because the ages of 6 to 12 are called middle childhood, and
Hmm.
they're also dubbed as the forgotten years. And
Mm.
it's like, 0 to 5, lots of
Yeah.
attention. We got campaigns. We know what to do 0 to 5, right? And then teens, we're in a teen mental health state of emergency and we're in a
Yep.
crisis. And so, but what do you think happens in the middle?
The most
Like,
crucial.
it's crucial. So that is what we're doing. And the first working title for this book, well, there's always a first one. It's not usually the initial title you go with, but was Good and Ready: How to Prepare
Mm.
Your Kids for Healthy Teenagehood. And it's still that, but we changed it from Good and Ready because it just wasn't sort of encompassing enough. So I cover so much. I cover race, I cover gender, I cover sexual development, I cover
Wow.
puberty, I cover bullying, I cover relationships, I cover school shootings. Like, we
Mm.
have kids at 6 years old, you have a kindergartner. At my kindergarten, they're already doing lockdown drills. They already
I know.
know,
Yes.
right? That scary things can
Yes.
happen. Bullying starts at the ages of 4 and 5 and peaks in middle
Yes.
school when they're 11 and 12 years old. Like, when people read, if they can get through it all, if people read what really is developing between those
Yes.
ages of 6 to 12, my hope is, I mean, sometimes I have readers, sometimes they go, oh my God, that part was scary. Body
Yeah.
image is a big one, very triggering for my
Yes.
readers. But I talk about, disordered eating, body image. Social media is a mega, mega chapter. That's like a triple chapter, but it's got so much good information in it. And it's not just a dogging on social media. We already know it's
It's
2024.
there.
Everybody already knows, right? It's not great for kids. It's not great for their body image, self-esteem,
Yes.
depression, anxiety, suicide. We know that. What I'm here to do is give you some solutions. I'm not going to just tell you stuff like, here's how terrible it is, climate anxiety. That's a
Yes.
real thing. I give the reader, like, here's the state of the state, but here's what you can do, because I want people to understand that teenage years, we are so well prepared for the attitude, for the rebellion, for the risk taking. We know what's going to happen. You don't
Yes.
know exactly, but we know what we're like gearing up for, right? Everybody who has a teenager is like, I literally had a lunch last week with somebody who said, I would actually trade my teenager for triplet colicky babies. That's how hard I think it is.
Mm.
Like, people, mentally you get geared up, like, buckle
Yes.
up. But you don't think about that in the school age years. You're just like, oh,
No.
they're so cute. And now they're at school. And now I can go back to work. Now I can write
Yes.
that book I've wanted to do. I can remodel my office like I've been wanting. And we think it's a time where we can lay back and relax. They're gone out of your care now, 7, 8 hours a day. They go
Yes.
to sports. Now there's not little parent coaches anymore. Now there's like a real
Yes.
coach, and you can leave. You can like go grocery shopping for an hour and come back and
I
pick them up.
know. Oh my gosh.
Right. So that's what I'm preparing people for, is just during these years, all the things that we can do to raise them really healthy then, but also to set them up so they don't have these mental health issues that we are so struggling with right now.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. My brain is working. I'm like, oh my gosh, you need to come back. Because so I started, I had my son at 34, so a lot later than some of my girlfriends. A lot of my girlfriends, mid 20s, late 20s. So it's the big difference. And a lot of them have 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, some teens. And they're like, listen, this is great that everything, I'm glad that there's like breastfeeding, like everything is breastfeeding and potty training and night and all this stuff. They're like, that's wonderful. I wish I had it, but I am struggling. I am struggling to raise my 8-year-old in this climate. I am struggling to raise my teenage daughter. So I'd always set in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I have to do something with that. And I knew eventually it would come, but of course, along this other thing. So I love that you have that component, because it's like you said, it's the crucial years. It's missing. When my son is telling me he's on a bus going to aftercare because he does this taekwondo, and he's like, oh, this boy had a phone, and we were going through his phone. I'm trying not to freak out. I'm giving him a poker face so he can tell me, did he see anything? I don't know. Thank God they played Roblox, but I was like, what if the boy has porn? Like, I don't know, right? This is an older kid who is in seventh grade because his school goes kindergarten. The whole point of describing this, is that there's so many things outside of our control. And I think, to your point, the transition, because kids are getting access to information younger and younger, where it was maybe more middle school or high school that you are exposed to things, it's now elementary school. And there's more of that. So my son is asking more questions about certain things. And to your point, being prepared for that, we're thinking, yeah, we got through the sleepless nights. No, if anything, I need to be more vigilant, right? Like, this is real. We need to be more vigilant with what's going on. So I love what you're doing, and however I can support you, like, yes, my brain is going. How can people connect with you? I'll put in the show notes, but please share how they can follow you, how they can connect with you, any resources that you have before we part ways.
Yes. Well, thank you for your enthusiasm, because writing a book can be a lonely process, right? And I'm just starting to put it out to the world, even the crucial years. Like, we decided on that, a month ago or whatever. And so now I'm like, how do people liking this title? Right. Like, and
Yeah.
everybody has the same thing. Like, I like it because it lets me know this is important. But I
Yes.
do want to say, before everybody follow, I tell people how you can follow me. These crucial years are also dubbed the age of opportunity. This is your
Mm,
window of opportunity. And that is my lens. Is, yes, some of it's going to feel like, right? But then it's like, oh my gosh, but you are still your child's greatest influence during the ages of
yeah.
6 to 12. That's why you have to do these things now, because when they're 14, 15, you're no longer usually their greatest source of
Yes.
guidance and influence. So I
For
just
sure.
wanted to round that out, because I don't want people to be scared. But
Yeah. I love that. Yes. Yes.
so here's what I'm doing. So I have a website, DrSherylZiegler.com, Ziegler. You can find me there. I am not super active on social, but I do have an Instagram, same handle, at Dr. Sheryl Ziegler. And I do put out all my NBC like news
Yes.
clips that I do. I basically make them into posts. And so I just try to put things out. Like today, I put out 1 in 3 tweens wants to be an influencer. That's what they want to be when they grow up. right? This is like, I'm just trying to put out little tidbits of
Yes,
information, but I am going to be starting a Substack, and that's what I'm really excited about. So if people
love
go
it.
onto my website and they sign up, it'll say sign up for my newsletter. I am gearing up because I want it to be a really good launch. And so I would love for people to find me on Substack, same exact handle at Dr. Sheryl Ziegler. And starting in June, so summer of 2024, I'm going to start putting out some really good information and just things that aren't even going to be covered in the book, things that we cut out because it was just too long, but it's still
Sure.
important. So that's also a new kind of venture for me, is how can I communicate this kind of information to people so that they can get it and just be inspired, even if it's a little tiny tip. And of course, my Podcouch, Dr. Sheryl's Podcouch, is a great way to, I only interview pretty much authors on that. It's like makes me proud. I'm sure like you too. Like you interview people you're interested in hearing what they have to say, and I interview authors who I'm interested in what they have to write.
Yes,
And so it's a great way to see like all sorts of things. It's all just parenting and mental health. So any of those
love it.
places, come find me, and I'll be doing a pre-order campaign this fall, and that's where I'll want
Yes.
to get people just excited about if you've got a kid, kindergarten through like sixth grade, hopefully this will be your jam.
Yeah, you need to connect with all, like, tell your PR if you have like PTA firms, like this is a big, you need to push all the things. Like I think a
Yes.
book tour or something. So yes, my mind is going for that.
Thank
Yeah,
you
because
for
I think it's so important. I think it's crucial and I'm in it, right? I didn't realize I was in it. You don't know until you're in it. And like I said, my son turning 6, starting kindergarten opened up a whole wide range of like this lens that I'm like, wait, where is now I actually need more help than more, right? Than just what it was. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Any other final thoughts? I know you shared a lot, but anything, there's a takeaway, if there's a parting word, a couple sentences, anything that you're like, let me leave your listeners with this.
I think that today, what I feel like saying is just there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of news, and there's a lot of ways of getting information. But unfortunately, what we know is that so much information that you're going to passively consume. And I say that on purpose. It's passive sometimes, not active. Like you're not seeking to find out, blah, blah, blah. You get this exposure. Just try to limit it. It is so important to our health that we start setting boundaries around how much active and passive information we are interacting with and we're consuming, because it is taking a real toll. At the peak of the pandemic, we were at like 75% burnout. We are at like 83% now. And one of the top reasons for that is the amount of like just negative news and strife that's coming on. So, yes, if you want to be informed about the serious stuff going on in the world, sure, be informed, set boundaries around it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Ziegler, for coming on, for sharing your story, for the work that you do. And yeah, continued blessings to you for love and light. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to you too for creating the Motherhood Village.
Thank you.